Welcome. Glad you have joined us on this Zoom event, Zoom Watch Party. I'm Dr. Matthias. I help facilitate and coordinate the ICP 2+ program. In addition, I have my hands in all of the missions degrees. I also help lead our Center for Great Commission Studies. And so if you are here as a mission student, or just any of our students interested in missions, you would have some contact with our office, but particularly in those degrees, I'm going to be a good resource. My office will be a resource in terms of advising, of getting you connected, figuring those things out. And so again, glad you joined us, whether you're here in person or perhaps you're joining via Zoom at a distance. And again, we do hope this is a helpful time. One of the things we like to do every year is expose our students to their opportunities, but also the connections to our sending partners. On the international side of things, our main primary partner is the International Mission Board. And today we're going to be joined by Alan Garnett, and he's going to give a little bit more introduction of himself, but he is a familiar face to us here at Southeastern. He has walked with probably hundreds of our students as they've explored potentially going overseas, or for those that have entered more fully into the process of heading overseas, whether that be for 2 years, 3 years, or for many for a career. And so, Alan, thank you for being with us. I'm going to turn things over to you and take it away.
All right. Thanks, Craig. It is a joy. I miss being on campus and doing this conference in person, but I'm thankful for the technology that allows us to go ahead and connect this way. My name is Alan Garnett, and I have been working with Southeastern and students there for close to 15 years. So it's been a lot of fun to see folks that have come through, gone to the field, some that have come back and are involved in ministry in the States, some that have come through and are still on the field. And that's a lot of fun to be a part of this process with the seminary. I want to talk just a little bit, talk through kind of the big picture of what you can expect with the application process, timing, that kind of thing. Some of my background is in college ministry. I was a college minister in Oregon for a little over 13 years before I came to work with the IMB. So now live in Richmond, Virginia, where the home office is, and officed out of here. And I'm the personnel consultant for the state of North Carolina. So anyone applying to serve with IMB in a funded position for 2 years or longer positions, I'm the consultant that you would work through. And so it is a joy, it is a privilege, it is a blessing to see God's activity in people's lives as they walk through this process and learn more about themselves, learn more about their relationship with God, and see that that call to international service really affirmed for them. Process-wise, really think towards starting the IMB process when you're about a year prior to being ready to deploy. So if you're going to finish on campus in the spring, in May, then think towards the previous spring, early summer to connect with IMB, connect with me, and start the application process. For those that are applying to serve midterm for a 2 or 3 year assignment for the ICP students, you can get through the process in 6 to 8 months pretty easily, but there's no need to stress on that. If you want to start early, that's great. For those that are applying long-term for apprentice, looking towards career service, then that is usually more of a 12 to 14 month process. Just because there's a little bit more involved on the back end of the process of connecting with trustees and trustee approval and appointment service before you go to orientation. The process itself is really pretty much identical. The paperwork that you're going to complete, the interviews you're going to have, the interview conference are the same for midterm or long-term. And so it's all going to be walking through the same process, same paperwork, and it's easy for us to switch between midterm or long-term at any point in that process as well. So we'll talk through that on a one-on-one basis as you're in the application as to which midterm, long-term, which is more appropriate for you and where you're at with education, experience, family, all of that. So just a quick overview of the process. I think there are some handouts there available that gives you kind of a big picture overview, but you're going to start the application through the IMB website, fill in some initial information. Your information is sent to me. If you're in North Carolina, I'll connect with you. We'll do a little bit of an initial interview, make sure that things are looking good, timing is right for you to be starting, just all of those basic requirements. And then the next step is we'll be connecting you with your church for a church assessment. So you will tell us who is your church contact, and I will send your information to that individual, and then they probably will connect with you, have a little bit of an interview, return a form back to me that is a church assessment form. And basically what that form is your church affirming you as an applicant with the IMB. It's not the church's final sign-off saying you're ready to go, but it is an affirmation of you being in the application process. Once I receive that affirmation from your church, then I send you the full application. That's where the bulk of the paperwork comes in. That's where you'll write your autobiography, you'll start the health screening process, write your Christian belief statements, we get references, background checks, financial statements, just all of those documents begin to flow in together. That is also the point where most people get slowed down and hung up. The number one reason for someone slowing down in this process is their own procrastination in filling out the paperwork. So that's on you. Everything else I can help you with, but I've got to have your paperwork before I can help you. We do recommend, request that as you get that full application, you do the health questionnaire first to get started on your medical screening, because that often takes longer, especially if there is a family and children involved. There's also a TCK assessment, TCK, Third Culture Kid, what we used to call MK. We're no longer using that term, mostly because a lot of our families, about 75% of our families overseas, are in restricted locations. So we don't want the kids calling themselves MKs or missionary kids. TCK is a broader term that's used by military, other expat organizations, gives a broader identity for the kids than just an MK would. So, but that assessment for children starts when they're 2 months old. So it is something that you want to start early in the process with as well. The other thing that we ask you to start early on is a witnessing journal. We send you the template, the instructions for that, really expecting to see an average of 1 to 3 entries a week where you're being intentional to share the gospel for evangelistic purposes, okay? So if that's something that you struggle with, whether it's knowing how to share or having the opportunities and how to create those opportunities, and now is the time to be working on that. Don't wait till you're in the process to start asking for help. But that's one of the things that we'll be looking at. You send that journal in to me on a monthly basis. I'll give you some feedback of what I'm seeing, but that is a basic requirement. If you're going to go overseas as a missionary, what are you going to do? You're going to share the gospel. And so that is an expectation that we want to see you doing that here before we send you overseas as well. The other things that I would say be working on now is cross-cultural experience. Yes, overseas experience is great. We want to see that. Volunteer trips, fantastic. But there also, we want to look at what are you doing to engage people cross-culturally right where you're at. So working with international students, refugees, inner city ministry, low-income housing projects, anything like that is going to be a cross-cultural experience. So we want to see you engaging people cross-culturally right where you're at. Even better, combine that cross-cultural experience with the evangelism experience, okay? Be sharing in a cross-cultural context. And then the third area I like to talk about is preparation, is anything that you can do to gain further experience in ministry leadership. So teaching a Bible study, leading a small group, teaching Sunday school, discipling others, working with youth or children, anything that gives you experience, leadership experience in a ministry context is going to help you as you go overseas as well. So those are kind of some of the big picture elements of the process. Once you've completed all of the application paperwork, we have your medical clearance in place, children's TCK clearance if you have kids, and references. Then all of those things are in. That's the point that I can invite you to an interview conference. The interview conferences in a normal season are in Richmond. Right now, we are still doing virtual conferences, have been since March, and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. But we have those once a month. But you participate in that conference, and that's kind of the time of wrapping up the assessment part of your application process. It's really an affirming time. You'll have your final interview with me as your consultant during that conference. You'll have a lot of information about IMB presented to you. You'll get more information about FPO, Field Personnel Orientation, and just a lot of information during that time. But it's a good time, it's an affirming time. And a big part of that conference also is talking with the affinity reps from the 9 different affinities and hearing about the jobs that are available. You'll get a job list of all the open jobs. Now, let me back up with the jobs. Right now, about 65% are coming to that interview conference with their name already on a job. That's great. If you've got a contact on the field where somewhere you've been on a volunteer trip, or maybe your church has a partnership with the team on the field that you want to go and serve a part of, have those conversations. The field can write a job reserved for you by name, and then it's available for you when you come to the interview conference, and that's great. If you don't have a job like that, then part of the conference is looking at all of the available jobs, and then after conference, you'll get access to a secure job website where you can apply for up to 3 jobs at a time. When you apply for a job, your information is sent to the team leader on the field, and they will reach out to you to do a little bit of a field interview. That is a field interview with field leadership, but it's also an opportunity for you to interview the field, okay? Have that perspective, have your questions ready. We're gonna give you a list of recommended questions that you ask the field. So you want to make sure that's a good fit for you, not just in what are the job responsibilities, but what's the makeup of that team? What kind of leadership style does that team leader have? What is his expectations of someone on his team? And so you have that opportunity through that field leadership, and then the team leader on the field will then tell our office if they want to extend an offer for that job. If you apply for 3 jobs, you have 3 field interviews with 3 different team leaders, chances are you may have 3 job offers. And then it's still going to come back to you to tell us which of those job offers you want to accept. So we're not going to place you on a job, assign you somewhere that you have not expressed interest in going and accepted that job offer. Once we finalize the job connection, then the paperwork flows in our office to finalize the job match and get you registered for the orientation. For midterm, you start your assignment the day you arrive at orientation. So if you're going out on a 2-year assignment, your 2-year calendar starts the day you arrive at orientation. For midterm, or for long term, that is the same. You start on that date, but you have opportunity to go on salary and benefits 1 month prior to orientation for long term. Midterm starts salary and benefits the day you start orientation. Okay, so that's kind of a quick, big picture overview of process. Just to talk through some of the things that slow people down in the process. As I said earlier, the biggest one is procrastination on doing the paperwork. So make sure you stay on top of things. The other thing I would say is, as you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Okay, this is my job, is to walk through the process with you. So you will help me do my job by letting me know when you have questions. Email is always great. Dr. Matthias, his office, can give you my contact information. Even before you start the application process, if you've got specific questions that you want to ask, please send me an email and I'll get back with you on those. That's sometimes very productive to be able to ask some questions before you even start the process. So that's fine. Other things that slow people down are medical clearance. The medical process is very thorough. It is very extensive. You will feel like there's no part of your life that goes unprobed. And that's true, okay? If you've heard horror stories from others that have gone through the process, I will validate those horror stories. It is a very in-depth process. But please know it is in-depth because we have your best interest in mind. Our medical office is looking at, first, your current health. And then secondly, can we keep you healthy overseas? Okay, sometimes that means that there's going to be a medical restriction on where you can serve. That maybe someone that's on a maintenance medication. We have to make sure they can get that medication where they're going. Or someone who has chronic neck or back problems. We're not going to put them in the bush of Africa where they're bouncing around on rough roads all the time. Asthma. What are the triggers for asthma? We're going to be looking at what is the location that's best for that. So sometimes there is a medical restriction that can affect where you can go, where you can be cleared to go. And we work through that as you are looking at jobs and clear that location with the medical office. The TCK clearance, sometimes an issue surfaces with children that have to be worked through. If a child is in speech therapy, they have to complete that therapy and be released by the therapist here before we can send you overseas, because we can't provide speech therapy in English overseas. So there's some things like that that will have to be looked at. Another area is we take a look at emotional mental health, and that sometimes maybe something that someone needs to spend 6 months working through with a counselor to work through something. We want to make sure that people are in a healthy place before we send them overseas. We're not looking for perfect people who have had perfect lives, okay? They don't exist. But we are looking for people who have dealt with life issues and are walking in a healthy place now. And we want to do everything we can to set you up to be successful overseas. So that includes doing what we can to make sure you're not taking unnecessary baggage with you that's unresolved. So again, trust that we have your best interest in mind. We do have a few years experience in sending missionaries and have seen a lot of issues of what happens on the field if someone goes and an issue's not been resolved before they go. So we will work through that. There'll be a dialogue between us in anything like that. But just be confident that we have your best interest in mind. The other thing I will say is, starting into the process, is settle in your mind the doctrine of God's sovereignty. Okay? There is nothing about this application process that is going to catch God by surprise. If you can settle that before you ever start, then if you hit a hiccup in the process, how you respond to that hiccup is going to be very different. I see folks that try to come through this process and they are so tunnel vision on getting to the field that they miss what God is trying to do in their lives now to prepare them to go to the field. So if you will settle that doctrine and know that God's timing is going to be perfect of when you get to the field. Trust Him in that. And this application process you're going to walk through is a part of that timing and a part of your preparation. Okay? So Greg, let's stop there and just see what questions we have and make sure this is a productive time for folks
get their questions answered. Alan, thank you. Very encouraging, also informative. We'll take a couple people gathered here. We'll take some questions from. Before we do that, there are a couple others that we have via the chat. The first one deals with finances and debt. Essentially, what are the allowable debt levels for someone wanting to serve with the IMB? Again, whether they're an ICP student or they fall in another degree or category. What can you speak to that? Yeah. The guideline for debt has changed recently. That actually is much more broad than what it used to be, much more open. So if you are going on a midterm assignment for 2 or 3 years, then the debt guideline for journeyman, debt payments when you're on the field need to be below $235 a month for a single or $394 a month for a couple. Okay, if you are an ICP student, that is a little bit higher. It's $275 for an individual, $460 for a couple. The difference there is a difference in the salary for a single and a married couple. For long-term, that guideline is debt payments under $345 a month for a single, $574 for a couple. So those are significantly higher than what they used to be. If you have a house to sell, that has to sell 30 days prior before starting orientation, FPO. If you come up to within 30 days of orientation and the house hasn't sold yet, then you'll get bumped to the next orientation. But we want to see that resolved before you start your assignment. Okay, good. Now that's helpful. Thank you. And I know that you're going to be sending some information for us with some of those changes, and we'll make sure we get that information out. But that's really helpful. Second question. Again, we're at Southeastern Seminary, so we like theological education. We think it's a good thing for anybody serving anywhere in ministry. But for the International Mission Board and kind of theological education requirements, for those that aren't in the ICP program, or perhaps for those that would not be a seminary student, are there theological ed requirements? And if so, what are they? Okay. For midterm, so journeyman, someone going out on a 2 or 3 year assignment, there are no theological education requirements. Okay. Journeyman must have a bachelor's degree. If you're going to apply for the Macedonian program, you have to have a bachelor's degree. There is opportunity for a 2 or 3 year assignment with no education requirements at all. It's called our ISC program. So that is an option there as well. You don't even have to have a bachelor's or any college education for that. But it would be looked at, do you have the experience, the expertise to do the job you're being asked to do? For those that are looking at long-term service, there are theological education requirements beyond a bachelor's. For singles and head of household, so it'd be singles and husbands, then to serve long-term for your apprentice term, there is 12 hours required that are very specific classes. It's 3 hours each: Old Testament survey, New Testament survey, hermeneutics, which there at Southeastern is called Bible exposition, and systematic theology, the Christian theology, any one of those classes. But you have to have 3 hours each in each of those 4 areas, okay? That's to be appointed for your first term. By the time that you finish your first 3 year term and are ready to go back for your second term, you have to have a minimum of 20 hours of seminary in place. Those additional 8 hours, there's a lot of flexibility. Pretty much anything that would have to do with ministry, missions, evangelism, discipleship, biblical counseling, anything like that would qualify. Southeastern is also very generous in working with you and giving you some credit for completing orientation, for completing time on the field during that first term, that you can work with a professor there at Southeastern and pick up those additional hours to get to the 20 hours pretty easily.
So 20 hours is the minimum required for our career missionaries. If someone wants to be a team leader, then they're required to have a total of 30 hours of seminary. So we don't require a full seminary degree except for if it's required for the job. If somebody's teaching in a seminary overseas, that's going to at least require an MDiv, if not a PhD. Or if they are in a structured context doing theological education with national pastors in a more structured way, that may require a full MDiv. For wives, there is also the requirement for the basic 12 hours of New Testament, Old Testament, and theology. The fourth class can be an elective. It does not have to be hermeneutics, but can be elective. The other thing for spouses, those 12 hours can be on the undergrad level or the graduate level, or they can be through the certificate courses there at Southeastern as well, which is a great option. The Go courses, very inexpensive. The BWI courses as well. Are they still called BWI?
Yes, they're still BWI, and in fact, okay, the Go courses are free of charge, so those are a good deal.
Yes. Okay, I need to come back with you on that. I wasn't aware of that. Mm-hmm. I knew they had been giving the Go courses at the BWI price.
Yeah, quite a few of them. Again, there might be a little bit of depending on the end goal for taking the course, there might be a little bit of a fee associated with that. Okay. But there is that.
Okay, option. They have been $25. Mm-hmm. If you do the certificate classes, yeah, it's a 2-for-1. You would take 2 certificate classes to equal 1 undergrad class. So you would have 2 Old Testament, 2 New Testament, 2 theology, 2 electives. And the certificate office there on campus can tell you exactly the classes that you need to meet the IMB requirement. If there's any question about that, you can contact that office or contact me directly, and we can clarify those. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Good. One more question from here, at least on the chat, and then we'll see if there's any other questions. So for those specifically in the MDiv International Church Planting, or sometimes referred to the 2+ program, on the back of that 2+ is a 2 or 3 oftentimes. And so can you just speak to, is there a difference in that if you're an ICP student, either serving for 2 years or 3 years? Again, what's the difference, or what are the options?
Yes. My perspective on that, yes, there is an option of serving for 2 years or 3 years. The difference really comes down to your sense and you're confident of God's call, okay? If you are confident of a long-term call to missions to serve overseas, then commit to 3 years up front, and on the field, they're going to give you the apprentice level training. So you would do full language study, cultural acquisition, mentoring by a career missionary, to where you are fulfilling all of the apprentice requirements during your ICP term. So then when you graduate, you would turn around to your second term, would go straight to career instead of having to serve another 3-year apprentice term towards long term, okay? For an ICP, the only reason I see to choose a 2-year commitment is if you are uncertain of a long-term call. But this is a time of going to the field, serving for a couple of years, checking this out. 2 years is going to give you long enough on the field that you can kind of determine, is this something God is calling you to long-term or not? But if you're not certain up front, then 2 years is a good option. You can go, you can serve your 2 years on the field, graduate, you fulfilled your degree and your obligation to IMB. Mm-hmm. You can also, if you commit to that 2 years and you get on the field and you say, oh yeah, this is definitely it, you can still do our quick turnaround process from that 2-year ICP term to long term, just that you would turn around to apprentice rather than a career, because you haven't fulfilled the apprentice requirements yet. So there is an option there. For me as a consultant, it is rare that I would have somebody in the ICP program that would start the application directly as apprentice for long-term commitment. But I think where you're at in your education, it's just a better fit for you to go out on a midterm assignment first. And if you commit to that 3 years up front, you're going to complete your apprentice requirement during that time anyway. So it's not going to cost you any time in getting to long-term career service, but it just gives you more flexibility on the front end.
No, that's helpful. And just for those that are with us and those that are listening online, in terms of ICP students, we have a mix. Some that go for just the 2 years, some that go that have gone 3 years, and some that kind of commit to 3 years, even though they're more in that shorter term category. And in terms of your degree, your MDiv, it doesn't impact it whether you are 2 year in the 2 year category or the 3 year category. You still have sufficient enough time to complete your field-based courses, and you also complete the practicum experience, whichever category you find yourself in. So just want to make sure that that's clear, but helpful.
Just another clarification on the ICP assignments. I often have people contacting me that are interested in one of our, what we call our support roles on the field. From my understanding, and Greg, you clarified this, those support assignments would not fulfill your ICP requirements. So support assignments are logistics, finance, member care, those type of roles that are more of a support to our missionaries on the field rather than being a frontline evangelism and church planting. So those type of roles would not fulfill the ICP requirements.
No, that's correct. And again, those are no less valuable than other roles, the support roles, that is. But in terms of fulfilling the ICP degree, your time on the field has to be directly related to international church planting, evangelism, discipleship. So that's why there is that stipulation. Again, doesn't necessarily hold true if you're in another degree program or wanting to serve with the board. And perhaps once you fulfill your degree requirements for the ICP, it might be in the future as you go back to the field, you fulfill one of those roles. But for the time being, that's correct. So no, that's good. Thank you. All right. Let me see if there are any questions from those that are gathered here. Any questions?
Can you talk a little bit more about the quick turnaround process for the 2 to 3 years?
Okay. So the question was maybe a little bit more insight or detail on this turnaround or the quick turnaround process after you've served on the field.
Sure. If you go out on a midterm assignment and want to then turn around to long-term, we have a process creatively called the turnaround process. Okay. And what we'll do is when you have about 9 months to a year left on the field in your current assignment, we will start working with you on updating your application for long-term service, okay? That will involve updating your medical clearance. You're not going to be starting the whole application over from scratch, but we'll just do some updates. We'll update medical clearance, TCK. We'll get a minimum number of references from folks on the field that you have worked with. And so we'll help you in getting all of those documentations in place. And then you will come home, you will have up to 6 months here in the States where you remain on salary and benefits. And during that 6 months, we will work out the timing to where you go through the trustee approval process, the appointment service, and are ready to go back to the field within the 6 months. And then you will return to long-term classification, whether that's apprentice or career, but you would return to a long-term classification. But it's an updating of your application. It's not starting from scratch by any means. Typically, people that are going to do that turnaround process, they're going to go back to the same place where they served during that first term. And so you're going to be using the language, the cultural acquisition, all of those things that you invested in during that first term as you go back for a long-term service. And if you're going back to that same location, there's also not a need for you to repeat orientation. So once you go through the appointment service, then you return to the field within 30 days of the appointment date. that helpful? Does that answer the questions?
Yes, that was helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Alan.
Okay.
Any other questions?
The amount of ICP work, classwork we have to do on the field in those first couple of years, what's that look like?
Yeah. And so the question was related specifically to the degree. I'll handle this one, but it was kind of field-based workload assignment, what's required in terms of fulfilling the academic portion of the degree. And so with that here, your campus-based portion covers, and again, Catherine can correct me if I'm wrong, but you're looking at about 69 hours here on campus, and so the degree itself is 83 or 84 hours. I'm always off by an hour, but anyway, I think it's 84. We'll go with 84. I'll correct it later if I'm wrong. And so it would be really the rest of that. But keep in mind, three of those credit hours happens through during your time at FPO. It's a way to get your introduction to missions credits. Again, we can talk more about that. Then once you're on the field, you have two practicum elements. One is your language or linguistics practicum. Those are 6 credit hours, and those are the easiest and the hardest credits to get. What I mean by that is we don't get in the way of what the board, how they've set it up for you to acquire language. Also the milestones and markers you need to reach by the end of your term. So you would just do what that looks like on the field with your supervisors there. And then what we do is we take through some paperwork and other assessments. Once you hit those milestones and markers, that would be at the appropriate language level for you to turn around or for you to come back career. We give you academic credit for that. The other practicum is a mentoring practicum called ICP. You already get mentoring through the IMB, but this is just kind of an extra layer of that you would be connected with perhaps your supervisor or another mentor that has academic credentialing and experience on the field, and they would work you through getting engaged in international church planting. We give you 3 credits for that as well. Again, we can work through that later. And then finally, you have 2 kind of courses, so 6 credit hours of courses as you're on the field. Again, that's laid out in the handbook. So you put all that together. That's, let's see, 6 and 6. What is that? 12 plus 3 is 8, 13. So 18, roughly about 18 credit hours is what your kind of your field-based time on the field. And we have that in the handbook. We'll make sure that's up on the ICP webpage, the handbook, the mentoring handbook. But a good question. So. Okay, any other questions? See online, anything in here that we can help with that as you have the IMB? This is the IMB right here through Alan. So you can ask any question you would like. Alan, anything else you feel like is pertinent information or anything you want to add to what you've already, and it's been helpful. So thank you for all that you've given us so far.
Yeah, I would just encourage you, if there are questions, don't hesitate to shoot me an email, and we can begin to dialogue through those questions anytime. Sometimes people have questions about medical conditions that would they be approved to serve with IMB. Shoot me that information, and we can address that early on so you're not left wondering. We certainly don't want someone to get in the middle of the process and have invested a lot of time and energy in completing the majority of the paperwork to find out that they're not going to get medical clearance. So if there's something that's questionable, I certainly do not mind entertaining that question ahead of time.
No, that's good. That's helpful. And so this has been good. And again, Alan Garnett with the IMB, he is not a stranger to our students, to this area or to Southeastern. Again, typically, which we don't know what that means anymore, but you would see him in and around campus. Oftentimes, that's when he's meeting with students to either just introductions to begin the process, to go further into the process. And so he is kind of your main contact, whatever degree program you find yourself in, or if you just happen to be in this area. We will make sure that you have his contact information Also, you can come by or contact the Center for Great Commission Studies. We can give you that information as well. For you ICP students, those that are here or those that are with us virtually, we will be uploading onto the ICP Moodle page, which is kind of your hub for information about the degree, things you need to know, opportunities as well. But we're going to be uploading two different documents. One is just the application process, which Alan went over with us in short. It's just a snapshot, so you can have that. The other is going to be, as we're going to update just a bit, but it's going to reflect kind of the basic requirements and expectations if you want to serve with the IMB. So we'll have those up in the next few days to a week or so. Again, look there. But again, you can always reach out to Alan or the IMB as you have questions. That's why on this side of things, you can always come by or reach out to the Center for Great Commission Studies, myself, Catherine Blinson, my assistant, as well, if you need clarification or have questions. Again, that's why we're here. Thank you so much for joining us, Alan. Thank you for your time, for joining us. I appreciate that. It's been very helpful for those that have been watching or will watch later as we've recorded this. Thank you for your time. We hope this has been helpful and beneficial. And again, just keep your ears and your eyes open for opportunities through the Center for Great Commission Studies. But even as Alan said, continue to trust the Lord for opportunities to meet and engage people cross-culturally and with the gospel. So thanks.